The venom in the woman's voice cut through the hushed luxury of the first-class cabin like a shard of glass. "I don't know what kind of scam you're pulling, but you do not belong here." All eyes turned to a young black woman, sitting quietly by the window, whose calm expression was a stark contrast to the escalating scene. The accuser, dripping in designer labels and entitlement, escalated her baseless attack, culminating in a call to the police to have the woman removed. But she made one catastrophic miscalculation. She assumed the woman was just a passenger. She never imagined that the person she was trying to humiliate was the one in command of the 300-ton aircraft they were all about to board. What happens when the person you try to eject from a plane is the only one who can fly it? The first-class cabin of Transatlantic Airways Flight 88 from New York's JFK to London Heathrow was a carefully curated bubble of tranquility. The scent of warm nuts and expensive champagne mingled with the soft, recycled air. The lighting was a gentle pre-dusk gold, designed to soothe the nerves of the world's elite as they prepared to be hurled across an ocean in a metal tube. In Seat 2A, Captain Amelia Sterling savored the final moments of her anonymity. To the other passengers, she was just a strikingly poised woman in her early 30s. Her civilian clothes were a study in understated elegance. A navy blue blazer over a cream silk blouse, tailored trousers, and simple leather flats. Her hair was pulled back into a neat, intricate bun at the nape of her neck. She was reading a well-worn paperback, a spy thriller, a guilty pleasure that helped her decompress before the intense focus required in the cockpit. This was her ritual. Board as a passenger, find her seat, and mentally transition from civilian to commander. The delicate peace was shattered by the arrival of the passenger for Seat 2C. Her name was Caroline Preston, and she moved not like a person, but like an event. Her platinum blonde hair was sculpted into a helmet of improbable perfection. Her Chanel suit was crisp, her Louis Vuitton carry-on was placed with a thud in the overhead bin, and her face was set in a mask of weary disdain for the world and everyone in it. Caroline's eyes, the color of a winter sky, swept the cabin before landing on Amelia. They narrowed almost imperceptibly. She saw a black woman in a seat that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her mind, a finely tuned engine of snap judgments and ingrained biases, clicked through a series of assumptions and arrived at a single erroneous conclusion. Imposter. She squeezed past Amelia to get to her window seat, her purse brushing Amelia's shoulder with just enough force to be intentional. Amelia didn't react, merely shifted slightly, her eyes never leaving her book. This lack of a flustered response seemed to irritate Caroline further. "Could you move your bag?" Caroline's voice was sharp. Amelia glanced down. Her small leather satchel was tucked neatly under the seat in front of her, well within her designated space. "It's not in your way," she said, her tone even and calm. "It is," Caroline insisted, though it clearly wasn't. "I need to stretch my legs. Some of us have important business to attend to and require comfort." A junior flight attendant, a young woman named Chloe with a nervous smile, hurried over. "Is everything all right here, ma'am?" Caroline turned the full force of her condescension on Chloe. "No, it is not. This person," she said, gesturing vaguely at Amelia without making eye contact, "is taking up my space and is being uncooperative." Amelia finally closed her book, marking her page with a practiced slowness. She looked from Caroline to the flustered flight attendant. "My bag is stowed correctly, and I have not been uncooperative. I believe there is a misunderstanding." "The only misunderstanding," Caroline snapped, her voice rising, "is how you managed to get a ticket for this cabin. Let me see your boarding pass. I'm sure it's a fake. I've heard about people using stolen points or fraudulent cards." The accusation hung in the air, ugly and loud. Other passengers began to stir, their quiet conversations faltering. A man in Seat 1A, a tech journalist named Ben Carter, discreetly angled his phone, pressing record on the voice memo app. He'd seen this script play out before, and he knew it was important to document. Chloe, the flight attendant, was hopelessly out of her depth. Intimidated by Caroline's aggressive certainty and expensive attire, she defaulted to appeasement. "Ma'am," she said to Amelia, her voice wavering, "perhaps if you could just show me your boarding pass, we can clear this all up." Amelia felt a familiar, weary anger rise in her chest, a feeling she had learned to expertly suppress. She had flown combat missions in Afghanistan. She had landed a 777 in a tropical storm with a failed engine. She could handle Caroline Preston. She calmly took her phone, unlocked it, and showed the digital boarding pass to Chloe. "Amelia Sterling, seat 2A. As you can see, everything is in order." Chloe glanced at it and nodded, relieved. "There you see, Mrs. Preston. It's all perfectly fine." But for Caroline, this was not about a ticket. It was about control. It was about a worldview that was being challenged by Amelia's mere presence. Seeing the valid pass only enraged her further. It was an inconvenient fact that ruined her narrative. "That can be faked," Caroline declared, her voice now loud enough to fill the entire cabin. "I work in risk management. I know how easy it is to forge documents. I don't feel safe with this person on the flight. She's being hostile and suspicious." "I have done nothing hostile," Amelia said, her voice dropping to a low, firm register that tolerated no argument. "You, on the other hand, are creating a disturbance. I suggest you sit down and calm yourself." That was it. For Caroline, being told to calm down by Amelia was the ultimate insult. It was an inversion of the power dynamic she felt entitled to. She whipped out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen with furious speed. "What are you doing?" Chloe asked, her eyes wide with panic. "I'm doing your job for you," Caroline spat. "I'm calling airport police. I am a premier gold-tier member with this airline, and I will not be harassed. There is an aggressive individual in first class who is refusing to verify her identity and is a potential security threat. Yes, I want to report it." She then lowered her voice slightly, but Ben Carter's microphone still caught it. "The woman is black, acting very erratically. Please hurry." Amelia Sterling, captain of Transatlantic Airways Flight 88, watched as the woman who would soon be her passenger called the police on her. She leaned her head back against the plush leather, closed her eyes for a brief second, and let out a sigh that was quieter than a whisper, but heavier than the world. The bubble of tranquility had not just been popped, it had been eviscerated. The real drama was about to begin. The arrival of law enforcement on a commercial aircraft is never a subtle event. It changes the molecular structure of the air, replacing the low hum of anticipation with a sharp metallic tang of fear and suspicion. Two Port Authority police officers, their expressions grim and their hands resting near their sidearms, boarded the plane. The senior officer, a man in his 50s named Miller with tired eyes, led the way. His younger partner, Officer Davis, followed, holding a clipboard and looking officious. The cabin fell into a tomb-like silence. Every passenger, from the hedge fund manager in 3B to the actress in 1D, was now an unwilling spectator. Caroline Preston, however, looked vindicated. She sat back in her seat, arms crossed, with the smug expression of someone whose authority has been publicly validated. She gave a slight nod to Officer Miller, as if they were co-conspirators in justice. "We received a call about a disturbance," Officer Miller announced, his voice a low rumble that commanded attention. "A report of a passenger causing a problem, refusing to show a valid boarding pass." Caroline pointed a perfectly manicured finger at Amelia. "It's her, in 2A. She became very aggressive when I questioned why she was here." Amelia remained seated, her posture radiating a calm that seemed to unnerve the officers more than any outburst would have. She watched them approach, her gaze steady. This was a public humiliation, meticulously engineered by a stranger's prejudice, and she knew that every move she made was being judged. "Ma'am," Officer Miller said, addressing Amelia, "I'm going to have to ask you to come with us." "On what grounds?" Amelia asked, her voice devoid of panic or anger. It was a simple question of process. "On the grounds that a complaint has been made. We need to verify your identity and your right to be on this aircraft. Now please, let's not make a bigger scene." A scene had already been made, and she was its unwilling star. With a slow, deliberate grace, Amelia stood up. She was taller than Caroline, a fact that seemed to register with a flicker of annoyance on the blonde woman's face. Amelia picked up her small satchel. "I will cooperate," Amelia said, "but for the record, I have already shown my valid boarding pass to the flight attendant, and the only person creating a disturbance here is the complainant." They escorted her from her seat into the galley near the boarding door, creating a small, impromptu interrogation space. The door to the jet bridge was still open, and the hum of the airport terminal drifted in. Amelia could feel the stares of every passenger burning into her back. Caroline was now craning her neck, a thin, triumphant smile on her lips. "ID, please," Officer Davis said, clicking his pen. Amelia reached into her satchel and produced her wallet. She handed over her driver's license. She then handed over her official, federally issued FAA airline transport pilot license. Officer Davis took them. He looked at the driver's license, Amelia Sterling. He looked at the pilot's license, Captain Amelia Sterling. He frowned, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. "This is a pilot's license." "Yes," Amelia said. "It is." "Are you a pilot?" he asked, as if the concept was foreign. "With this airline," Amelia confirmed. "For 8 years. Captain for 2. Officer Miller, the older officer, was growing impatient. "Look, ma'am, anyone can get a novelty license. We need to see your ticket information and confirm it with the airline." Just then, the curtain separating the galley from the cockpit swished open. 2 figures emerged. One was Margaret, the senior flight attendant, a woman with decades of experience and an air of unflappable authority. The other was First Officer Derek Shaw, a man with a square jaw and kind eyes, already in his crisp white pilot shirt with the 4 stripes of a senior first officer on his epaulets. They had been finishing their pre-flight briefing in the cockpit and were wondering about the delay. Margaret's eyes widened as she took in the scene. The 2 police officers, a humiliated-looking Amelia, and the tension thick enough to be a physical presence. "Officers, what on earth is going on here?" Margaret demanded, her voice cutting through the procedural haze. "We're handling a situation, ma'am," Officer Miller said dismissively. Derek Shaw, however, was staring at Amelia. A slow smile of recognition spread across his face, quickly followed by confusion. "Amelia, what's all this? We were just about to call for you." He then turned to the officers. "Gentlemen, is there a problem?" "This woman," Officer Miller began, gesturing to Amelia, "is being questioned regarding her presence on this flight." Derek's brow furrowed. He looked from the officers to Amelia, then back again. A light of dawning, horrified understanding lit his eyes. He stepped forward, placing himself subtly between the officers and his captain. "Officers, I believe there has been a profound misunderstanding," Derek said, his voice ringing with authority. He looked directly at them, then nodded respectfully towards Amelia. "This isn't just a passenger. This is Captain Amelia Sterling." He paused for effect, letting the words sink in. "She's the captain. She's flying this plane to London." The silence that followed was absolute. Officer Miller's jaw went slack. Officer Davis stared, his mouth slightly agape, looking from the pilot license in his hand to the woman in front of him, then to the uniformed first officer confirming her identity. The pieces clicked into place with an audible, crashing thud of reality. But the most dramatic transformation was in Seat 2 C. Caroline Preston, who had been leaning forward to catch every delicious moment of the drama, froze. The smug, triumphant expression on her face melted away, replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her skin a pasty, sickly white that clashed horribly with her expensive foundation. Her perfectly painted lips parted, but no sound came out. She looked as if she had been struck by lightning. The woman she had profiled, harassed, and tried to have arrested wasn't an imposter. She was the commander. The person whose authority Caroline had maliciously questioned was, in fact, the ultimate authority on the aircraft, the one responsible for the lives of all 200 souls on board, including her own. Officer Miller cleared his throat. his face flushing a deep, embarrassed red. "Captain Sterling, our apologies. We were just responding to a call." Amelia simply nodded, her expression unreadable. She took her IDs back from the mortified Officer Davis. "Your response," she said, her voice quiet but carrying the weight of a judge's gavel, "was noted." She then turned to her first officer. "Derek, has the final load sheet come through yet?" "Just arrived, Captain," he said, eager to move on. "Excellent," Amelia said. She turned, her gaze sweeping past the shell-shocked officers and the gawking passengers before landing, for one brief, searing moment, on Caroline Preston. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Her look was a silent, devastating testament to Caroline's monumental error. Then she turned and walked through the curtain into the cockpit, leaving a cabin full of stunned silence, and one woman in seat 2C who was beginning to understand the terrifying depth of her mistake. The cockpit of a Boeing 777 is a sanctuary of focus. Once the heavy reinforced door clicks shut, the world outside, with its passenger dramas and petty tyrannies, is supposed to fade away, replaced by the orderly language of checklists, instrument readings, and air traffic control. For Captain Amelia Sterling, stepping onto the flight deck was usually like coming home. Today, it felt like seeking refuge. First Officer Derek Shaw followed her in, his expression a mixture of apology and anger. "Amelia, I am so sorry. I can't believe that happened. If Margaret and I had come out 2 minutes earlier..." Amelia was already strapping herself into the left-hand seat, the captain's seat. Her movements were economical and precise, a physical manifestation of her mental state. She was compartmentalizing, boxing up the humiliation and rage, and stowing it away where it couldn't interfere with her job. "It's not your fault, Derek," she said, her voice already taking on the professional, slightly detached tone of a commander. "Let's get the pre-flight checklist started. We're already behind schedule." "Because of her," Derek muttered, plugging in his headset. "That woman, Caroline Preston, according to the manifest. What is the airline's policy on removing a passenger for causing such a disturbance? We could have her taken off the flight right now. I'll back you 100%. Amelia paused, her hand hovering over a switch on the overhead panel. The thought was tempting. The ultimate, immediate, karmic payback. To have the officers she had just dismissed be called back to escort a pale and trembling Caroline Preston off the plane. The justice would be poetic, but it wouldn't be professional. "No," she said firmly. "We're not delaying this flight any further. She bought a ticket. She's our passenger. Our responsibility. End of story." Amelia's personal code was stricter than any airline policy. Her authority came from her professionalism, and using it for personal revenge, however justified, would diminish it. "Besides," she added, a ghost of a wry smile touching her lips, "I think the next 7 hours will be punishment enough for her." Derek looked at her, his respect for her deepening. He nodded. Checklist initiated, APU on and running. As they went through the meticulous rhythmic litany of checks, Amelia's mind settled. This was her domain. Here her authority was absolute, earned not by the color of her skin or the price of her ticket, but by thousands of hours of training, study, and experience. The rhythmic call and response of the checklist was a balm to her frayed nerves. Flight controls. Checked. Fuel quantity. Checked. 78.3 tons. Seatbelt sign. On. Outside the cockpit, the atmosphere was anything but calm. The story of what had happened had spread through the cabin with the speed of a text message. Whispers darted from row to row. Ben Carter, the journalist, was typing furiously on his laptop, his face grim. He had the audio, the names, the timeline. He was crafting a narrative that was about to explode onto the internet. The flight attendants, led by Margaret, now treated Caroline Preston with a glacial, impeccable politeness that was far more chilling than any overt hostility. Every offer of a drink, every inquiry about her comfort was delivered with a smile that did not reach the eyes. Caroline had become a non-person, an island of pariahdom in a sea of luxury. She tried to pretend nothing was wrong. She opened a copy of The Economist, holding it up like a shield. but her hands trembled, making the pages rustle. She couldn't focus. The words blurred. Every quiet laugh she heard from another seat felt like it was directed at her. Every time a flight attendant walked past, she flinched. The gilded cage of first class had become a pillory. Suddenly, the cabin speakers crackled to life. A voice, smooth, confident, and utterly calm, filled the space. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain, Amelia Sterling, speaking. On behalf of myself and the entire crew, I'd like to welcome you aboard Transatlantic Airways Flight 88, with non-stop service to London Heathrow. We're just finishing up our final preparations on the ground and expect to be pushing back from the gate in approximately 5 minutes. Our flight time tonight will be 6 hours and 50 minutes. We're expecting a mostly smooth ride, though there are some weather systems over the North Atlantic we'll be navigating around." In seat 2C, Caroline froze. That voice was coming from the sky, from the heavens of the aircraft, imbued with an authority she could not challenge. It was the voice of the woman she had tried to have arrested. Every calm, professional word was a fresh wave of humiliation. "The weather in London is currently clear, with a temperature of 15 degrees Celsius. For now, please sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight. We'll be dimming the cabin lights for departure shortly. Thank you." As the announcement ended, a new character in the drama made her presence known. In seat 3D, Dr. Anya Sharma, a renowned cardiologist on her way to a conference, had observed the entire initial confrontation. She was a woman of science and observation, and she had noted Caroline Preston's increasingly agitated state. She saw the slight tremor in her hands, the sheen of sweat on her brow, the way her breathing was becoming just a little too shallow. Dr. Sharma had a feeling her medical skills might be needed before they reached Heathrow. The human body, she knew, had a way of keeping score, and Caroline Preston's account was deeply in the red. Up in the cockpit, Amelia pushed the throttles forward. The massive engine spooled up with a powerful roar, and the Boeing 777 began its inexorable roll down the runway. She was in her element, leaving the drama on the ground behind. But some dramas refuse to be left behind. They follow you, clinging to the fuselage and waiting for the right moment to re-emerge at 37,000 feet. 3 hours into the flight, the Atlantic Ocean below was a vast, featureless expanse of black. Inside the cabin, a routine calm had settled. Dinner service was over. The cabin lights were dimmed, and most passengers were either asleep or lost in the blue glow of their entertainment screens. Caroline Preston was not one of them. She had picked at her lobster thermidor, the expensive food tasting like ash in her mouth. She had tried to watch a film, but the face of the actress kept morphing into Amelia's calm, judging eyes. Sleep was an impossibility. She was trapped in a pressurized tube of her own making, her anxiety a coiling serpent in her gut. She was not, under normal circumstances, a nervous flyer. But these were not normal circumstances. Every slight dip of the aircraft, every change in the engine's drone, sent a jolt of panic through her. In the cockpit, Amelia and Derek were monitoring a developing weather system on their navigation display. A vibrant, angry-looking patch of yellow and red lay directly across their flight path. "That's building up faster than the forecast predicted," Derek noted, his brow creased in concentration. "Looks like some significant convective activity." "I see it," Amelia replied, her eyes scanning the instruments. "Let's request a deviation. 20 nautical miles to the north should get us around the worst of it." She keyed her microphone. "Atlantic Control, this is Transatlantic 88 requesting a 20-mile deviation to the north to avoid weather." "Transatlantic 88, deviation approved," came the crackled reply from the controller hundreds of miles away. Amelia's hands moved deftly, banking the massive aircraft into a slow, gentle turn. But weather is not always predictable. As they skirted the edge of the system, a finger of invisible, violent air reached out and grabbed them. The plane dropped. It wasn't a gentle dip. It was a sudden, stomach-lurching plunge of several hundred feet. A collective gasp echoed through the cabin. Loose items rattled. In the galley, a coffee pot crashed to the floor, The seatbelt sign, which Amelia had preemptively switched on, binged sharply through the cabin. Then the shaking began. The aircraft was caught in severe, unexpected turbulence. It shuddered and bucked like a wild animal, the wings flexing visibly in the dark. Immediately, Amelia's voice came over the intercom. It was the same calm, measured tone from before, but now it held a new layer of command. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've encountered some unexpected turbulence. Please return to your seats immediately and ensure your seatbelts are securely fastened. Flight attendants, please take your seats." Her voice was meant to be a lifeline of reassurance in the chaos. For most passengers it was, but for Caroline Preston, it was the voice of her tormentor, the narrator of her personal nightmare. The combination of the violent shaking, her pre-existing anxiety, and the psychological torment of the flight conspired to push her over the edge. Her heart began to pound against her ribs, a frantic, irregular drumbeat. The cabin, already seeming small and confining, felt like it was shrinking around her. She couldn't breathe. Her chest tightened, and a sharp, radiating pain shot down her left arm. Heart attack. The thought, primal and terrifying, seized her mind. She gasped, clawing at her throat. I can't breathe," she wheezed, her voice a strangled whisper. The passenger next to her, a young man who had been asleep, woke with a start. He saw the panic in her eyes, the gray pallor of her skin. He fumbled for his call button. In seconds, Margaret, the senior flight attendant, was there, expertly bracing herself against the lurching of the plane. "Ma'am, Mrs. Preston, what's wrong?" "My chest, my arm," Caroline stammered, tears of terror streaming down her face. I think I'm having a heart attack." Margaret's training kicked in. She kept her voice calm but firm. "Okay, Mrs. Preston, I need you to try and take slow, deep breaths. We're going to help you." She turned to another flight attendant. "Get the emergency medical kit and the defibrillator. Now!" Then Margaret did what she was trained to do in a medical emergency. She picked up the intercom phone. "This is an emergency. Is there a doctor on board? I repeat, is there a medical doctor on board? Please identify yourself to the cabin crew." A few rows back, Dr. Anya Sharma unbuckled her seatbelt. Holding onto the seats for balance, she made her way forward through the still shaking cabin. "I'm a doctor," she announced, her voice cutting through the noise. "I'm a cardiologist." Margaret's face flooded with relief. As Dr. Sharma knelt beside Caroline's seat, the irony of the situation settled over the first-class cabin with the weight of a shroud. The woman who had believed she was the arbiter of who belonged, the one who held everyone else in contempt, was now utterly helpless. Her life was in the hands of strangers, a flight attendant she had disdained, a doctor she had ignored, and flying high above the storm, a captain she had tried to have thrown in jail. Margaret picked up the interphone to the cockpit. "Captain, this is Margaret. We have a medical situation in the first-class cabin. Passenger in 2C is experiencing chest pains and difficulty breathing. We have a doctor with her now." In the cockpit, Amelia absorbed the information, her face a mask of professional focus. The universe, it seemed, had a very dark sense of humor. The passenger in 2C, of course. "Understood, Margaret," Amelia replied, her hands steady on the controls as she navigated the last of the turbulence. "Keep me advised of the doctor's assessment. Let me know if a diversion is recommended." She had a decision to make. Diverting a 777 to the nearest suitable airport, perhaps in Iceland or Newfoundland, was a multi-million-dollar decision, a logistical nightmare that would affect hundreds of people. And it would be for the sake of the woman who had caused her such profound public humiliation. Her personal feelings screamed one thing, but her professional duty screamed another. And in the cockpit, duty was the only thing that mattered. The karma that was hitting Caroline Preston wasn't just public shame. It was now a terrifying life-or-death drama, playing out at 37,000 feet, entirely at the mercy of the very people she had wronged. While Dr. Sharma worked on Caroline in the cabin, Captain Amelia Sterling and First Officer Derek Shaw worked in the cockpit, flying the plane. The worst of the turbulence had subsided, but their workload had just doubled. They were now managing a potential medical emergency on top of navigating a complex oceanic route. Dr. Sharma was a picture of professional calm amidst the chaos. She took Caroline's pulse, which was rapid and thready. She spoke to her in a low, soothing voice, asking questions about her medical history while simultaneously assessing her vital signs. The flight attendants brought the medical kit, and Dr. Sharma found a portable pulse oximeter and a blood pressure cuff. Her blood pressure is elevated but not dangerously so, Dr. Sharma reported to Margaret. Oxygen saturation is a little low. It appears to be a severe panic attack manifesting with physical symptoms, but we can't rule out a cardiac event without an EKG. Margaret relayed this information to the cockpit via the interphone. Doctor says it's most likely a panic attack, but she can't be 100% certain. Amelia processed this. Asked the doctor for her professional recommendation. Is the passenger's life in immediate danger? Does she recommend we divert? The question was relayed. Dr. Sharma looked at Caroline, who was now breathing a little easier with the help of an oxygen mask. The terror was still in her eyes, but the acute physical crisis was passing. Diverting to a remote airfield in the middle of the night would be a major ordeal. Tell the captain that in my opinion she is stable, Dr. Sharma said decisively. Her symptoms are consistent with acute anxiety, not myocardial infarction. Diversion is not medically necessary at this time, provided she can be kept calm. We can manage her until we get to London, where she should undergo a full medical evaluation. The message was passed to Amelia. She felt a quiet sense of relief. The decision was now clear, backed by medical advice. It aligned with her professional instinct to maintain the flight's integrity if possible. Understood, Amelia said into the phone. We continue to London as planned. Thank you, Margaret, and please extend my personal gratitude to the doctor. With the medical crisis managed, another storm was breaking, this one in the digital world. Ben Carter, the journalist in Seat 1A, had been working non-stop. He had Wi-Fi, a ringside seat, and a story that was pure gold. He had written a full-length article, complete with the damning audio of Caroline's call to the police and eyewitness accounts from other passengers he had discreetly messaged. He titled it, Bigotry at 35,000 feet. The woman they tried to eject was the captain. He hit publish on his widely read tech and culture blog. Then he took to Twitter, firing off a thread that summarized the incident in punchy, shareable snippets. Thread. Currently on transatlantic flight 88, and you will not believe what I just witnessed. A white passenger in first class, I'll call her Caroline, just called the police on a black woman, accusing her of having a fake ticket and being a security threat. Police boarded the plane, pulled the woman aside for questioning in front of everyone. The humiliation was palpable. Caroline looked on with a smug grin. And then the plot twist of the year. The first officer comes out and identifies the woman they are harassing. Her name is Captain Amelia Sterling. She is the pilot flying the plane. The thread exploded. It was retweeted thousands of times in minutes. The hashtags #FlyLikeAmelia and #transatlantictantrum started trending. By the time Flight 88 began its descent towards the green fields of England, the story was a global phenomenon. News outlets from CNN to the BBC had picked it up. Transatlantic Airways' social media accounts were in meltdown. Caroline Preston, sedated and exhausted in her seat, was oblivious to her newfound infamy. She was only aware of the gentle descent, the changing engine pitch, and the voice that came over the intercom one last time. Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin our final descent into London Heathrow, I'd like to ask you to please ensure your seat backs and tray tables are in their full upright position. It has been our pleasure flying you tonight. Amelia then executed a textbook landing. In challenging crosswinds, she greased the massive Boeing 777 onto the runway with a smoothness that barely registered as a bump. It was the final, silent demonstration of her absolute mastery and professionalism. As the plane taxied to the gate, a smattering of applause broke out in the cabin, a rare and genuine tribute to the crew's handling of a difficult flight. It was for the smooth landing, for managing the turbulence, and for the unspoken drama everyone now knew about. It was for Captain Sterling. As the seatbelt sign switched off, the passengers began to gather their belongings. Caroline remained in her seat, waiting for the crowd to thin, a deep sense of dread pooling in her stomach. When she finally switched her phone off airplane mode, it vibrated so violently in her hand she almost dropped it. The screen lit up with a terrifying cascade of notifications. Hundreds of emails, dozens of missed calls, text messages from friends, family, and colleagues, all with the same frantic tone. "What did you do? Have you seen the news? Call me immediately." Her company, a prestigious consulting firm named Preston and Finch, was being mentioned everywhere. Her own name was trending on Twitter. Ben Carter's article, with her picture, a discreet shot he had taken during the initial confrontation, was the top story on multiple news sites. She wasn't an anonymous passenger anymore. She was Caroline Preston, the racist woman who called the cops on the pilot. Her world had not just been turned upside down, it had been incinerated, and the ashes were being broadcast live to the entire planet. The karma that had begun with a pale face in the cabin had followed her across the ocean and was now waiting at the gate, ready to drag her into a public inferno. The sterile, impersonal environment of London Heathrow's arrivals hall became the setting for the final act of Caroline Preston's professional life. She had expected to be met by a limousine service ready to whisk her to a multi-million-pound merger meeting. Instead, she was met by a digital guillotine. The first official blow came via email as she stood in the immigration line. The subject line was stark: immediate and indefinite suspension. It was from her business partner, George Finch, a man with whom she had built their company from the ground up. The email was brief and brutal. It referenced the catastrophic lapse in judgment and the irreparable reputational damage to their firm. The deal she had flown to London to close had, of course, been rescinded. The client, a progressive tech firm, wanted nothing to do with a company represented by a viral symbol of bigotry. Her phone rang. It was George. She answered, her hand trembling. She didn't even get to say hello. "Caroline, what in the hell were you thinking?" His voice was a raw nerve of fury. "We're ruined. Our clients are calling, our stock is plummeting, and our firm's name is being dragged through the mud next to yours all over the world. Preston and Finch is toxic because Preston is toxic. We're done, Caroline. The board is meeting this afternoon. You need to prepare your resignation." The call ended. Caroline stood frozen, the noise of the airport fading into a dull roar in her ears. In the space of a 7-hour flight, she had lost her company, her reputation, and her future. The entitlement that had been her armor for so long had become a self-destruct mechanism. Meanwhile, the fallout for Transatlantic Airways was swift. Their PR department went into overdrive. The CEO issued a formal, public apology directly to Captain Amelia Sterling, praising her extraordinary grace and professionalism under duress. The airline announced a full internal investigation and the immediate implementation of a new, mandatory anti-bias and de-escalation training program for all cabin crew. They initially attempted to make a scapegoat of Chloe, the junior flight attendant, citing her failure to control the situation. But they hadn't counted on the solidarity of the crew. Margaret, the senior attendant, and First Officer Derek Shaw went to bat for her, writing official statements that highlighted the extreme pressure and intimidation tactics used by Caroline Preston. They argued that Chloe needed more training, not termination. The airline, wary of more bad press, relented. Chloe was enrolled in the new training program. Amelia Sterling became an unwilling celebrity. She was inundated with interview requests and media attention. Initially, she wanted nothing more than to get back in the cockpit and fly, away from the noise. But she quickly realized the incident had given her a platform she never asked for but couldn't ignore. She gave one powerful interview to a major news network. She spoke not of anger or revenge, but of the systemic nature of the bias she faced. What happened on that flight was not an isolated incident, she stated, her composure as steady as it was in the cockpit. It was a very public example of the biases that people of color, and women in male-dominated fields face every single day. The question isn't why this happened to me, but how many times it happens to others without a dramatic reveal to make the world pay attention. Her grace and eloquence won her universal admiration. Transatlantic Airways, as part of their settlement with her, not only gave her a significant financial compensation, which she had to be convinced to accept, but also promoted her to their fleet of flagship A380s, making her one of the youngest captains on the super jumbo jet. Months passed. The story faded from the headlines, but the consequences lingered. Caroline Preston was a ghost. She had lost her company, and her name was too notorious for anyone else to hire her in a senior role. She sold her lavish apartment to cover legal fees and moved to a small, anonymous town. One evening, while channel surfing in her drab, rented cottage, she stopped on a local news segment. The story was about a new scholarship program, the Sterling Skies Initiative, created to help underprivileged youth and minorities attend flight school. The initiative was being launched with a foundational grant from a private donor. The reporter was interviewing the founder, Captain Amelia Sterling, who was standing in front of a small training aircraft, smiling, surrounded by a diverse group of aspiring young pilots. "I was fortunate to receive a settlement from the airline," Amelia explained to the camera, "and I wanted to use that money to ensure the cockpit door is open for everyone with the talent and the passion, regardless of their background or what they look like. The sky belongs to everyone." Caroline stared at the screen, the remote slipping from her hand. The money. The money the airline paid for her mistake, for her prejudice, was now being used to create the very thing she had tried to deny: opportunity. It was being used to build a future where more people like Amelia Sterling could take their rightful place in the world. The karma wasn't just that Caroline had lost everything. The hard, final karma was that her ugly act of exclusion had been transformed, by the grace and character of the woman she targeted, into a powerful engine of inclusion. Amelia Sterling had taken the poison Caroline had offered, and had cultivated a garden from it. Caroline was left with nothing but the silence of her empty house and the stark, bitter knowledge of what she had destroyed and what she had inadvertently helped to build. 2 years can be a lifetime. For some, it is a period of growth, of building, of turning fallow ground into a flourishing garden. For others, it is an erosion, a slow grinding away of the self, until all that remains is a silhouette of what once was. 2 years after Flight 88 made its turbulent journey across the Atlantic, its two main protagonists lived in separate universes, forged in the crucible of that single fateful day. One universe was a small, sun-drenched airfield in upstate New York. The air smelled of cut grass, warm asphalt, and aviation fuel, the perfume of possibility. Here, on a brilliant Saturday morning, Captain Amelia Sterling stood on the tarmac, her arms crossed, a gentle smile on her face. The crisp, four-striped uniform of her A380 command was hung up for the weekend. Today she wore a simple polo shirt embroidered with the logo of the Sterling Skies Initiative, jeans, and aviator sunglasses. Beside her, a young woman named Maya Rodriguez, barely 20, was performing a pre-flight check on a small Cessna 172. Her movements were hesitant but meticulous, her brow furrowed in concentration as she cross-referenced the checklist in her hand. Maya was the first graduate of Amelia's scholarship program, now a certified private pilot working on her instrument rating, and the initiative's star mentor for new students. "Don't forget to check for fuel contamination," Amelia said gently, not as a commander, but as a teacher. "Always sump the tanks even if you flew it yesterday." "Yes, Captain," Maya said, her face breaking into a grin. "I remember. You said trust nothing but my own eyes." "Good." Amelia's smile widened. This was her victory. It wasn't the fawning articles that were still occasionally written about her, nor the respectful nods from colleagues who knew her story. It wasn't even the breathtaking view from 40,000 feet as she commanded the world's largest passenger aircraft on its way to Dubai or Hong Kong. The victory was this: The focused look in Maya's eyes, the confidence in her hands as she drew a fuel sample, the bright future taking flight in a young woman who had been told her whole life that the sky was for other people. Amelia leaned against the wing of the small plane, watching the first class of her second year of students arrive, a diverse group of teenagers buzzing with an energy that felt like electricity. The incident with Caroline Preston felt like a scene from another person's life now. The searing humiliation had long ago cooled, reforged by purpose. In the quiet moments on long-haul flights, staring at the constellations, she had come to a strange and profound realization. Caroline, in her own toxic way, had given her a gift. She had given her a voice. Before that day, Amelia was a pilot, content in the anonymous professionalism of the cockpit, but Caroline's prejudice had thrust her into the light, and in that light Amelia had discovered a new mission, to make sure she wasn't an anomaly, but the beginning of a new standard. She no longer felt anger towards Caroline. What she felt now was a deep, almost clinical pity. She saw her as a catalyst, a chemical agent in an experiment that had produced an unexpectedly wonderful result. The settlement money, the blood money as she had first thought of it, had become seed money. It was building something that would long outlast the memory of one woman's hatred. "Okay, Captain Sterling," Maya said, snapping Amelia from her reverie. "She's all yours. The new students are waiting for their first flight." Amelia clapped her on the shoulder. "They're not flying with me today, Maya. They're flying with you. You're the lead instructor for the Discovery flights." Maya's eyes went wide. "Me? But I'm still just—" "You're a pilot," Amelia finished for her, her voice firm and full of pride. "And you're one of the best I know. Now go show them what's possible." As Maya, her face alight with a new profound sense of self-worth, walked over to the waiting students, Amelia felt a sense of peace that was deeper and more satisfying than any smooth landing. This was her horizon, and it was limitless. The other universe was a small, windswept cafe in a forgotten seaside town in Cornwall, England. The air smelled of stale beer, fried fish, and damp disappointment. The windows were fogged with a persistent mist, blurring the gray sea and the gray sky into a single, melancholic canvas. Behind the counter, a woman wiped down the sticky surface with a damp rag. Her movements were slow, automatic, devoid of energy. The expertly sculpted blonde hair was gone, replaced by a mousy brown cut, showing prominent gray roots at the parting. The designer suits had been replaced by a shapeless black fleece and worn-out jeans. This was what remained of Caroline Preston. She called herself Carol now. After the public disgrace, she had fled. She took what little money she had left after the legal battles and the dissolution of her company, and disappeared. She had chosen this town for its aggressive anonymity, a place where no one knew her name or her past. Her job at the Salty Dog Cafe was a penance. She served greasy breakfast to fishermen and lukewarm tea to pensioners, earning in a week what she used to spend on a single lunch. The irony was not lost on her. She, who had once managed multi-million-pound risk portfolios, now spent her days ensuring the till balanced to the penny. She, who had once commanded boardrooms with her sharp intellect, now took orders from a gruff owner named Stan, who communicated mainly in grunts. A tourist couple came in, shaking the rain from their coats. They were loud, entitled, complaining about the weather, the service, the weakness of the Wi-Fi. The man snapped his fingers at her to get her attention. "Hello? A little service?" 2 years ago, Caroline would have annihilated him with a withering glare. She would have used her status like a weapon. Now she just flinched. She saw, with a sickening lurch in her stomach, a faint echo of herself in his smug, impatient face. The reflection was horrifying. "What can I get for you?" she asked, her voice flat. As she prepared their cappuccinos, her mind drifted back, as it so often did, to Flight 88. In the beginning, her thoughts had been a maelstrom of rage and self-pity. She blamed the journalist, the flight attendants, the airline, the woke mob on the internet, everyone but herself. But time and isolation had worn down her defenses. The anger had faded, leaving behind the cold, heavy stone of shame. She now understood what she had done. in her desperate need to maintain her place in a world she saw as a zero-sum game. She had tried to invalidate another human being's existence. She had looked at Captain Amelia Sterling and refused to see her, and the world in turn had refused to see Caroline anymore. It was a perfectly balanced, soul-crushing justice. On a small, flickering television mounted in the corner of the cafe, a daytime news program was playing. It was a "Where Are They Now" segment. And then, there she was, Captain Amelia Sterling, looking vibrant and happy, her face framed by sunshine. The reporter was gushing about the Sterling Skies initiative. What started as a small scholarship funded by a private settlement, the reporter chirped, has today announced a major national partnership with Transatlantic Airways. The airline will be funding a full expansion of the program, creating Sterling Skies chapters at flight schools across the country, aimed at fostering the next generation of diverse aviators. The camera panned over a group of smiling, cheering students standing with Amelia. One of them, a bright-eyed Latina, was being interviewed. "Captain Sterling didn't just give me wings," Maya said, her voice thick with emotion. "She gave me a horizon." In the dim, damp cafe, Caroline felt the last of her internal foundations crumble. It wasn't just that Amelia had succeeded. It was that she had built an empire of hope on the very ground Caroline had tried to scorch. Her act of hate hadn't been an end point. It had been a beginning. Her attempt to shrink Amelia's world had only resulted in its exponential expansion, while her own had contracted to the 4 sticky walls of this cafe. She finished her shift, took off her stained apron, and collected her meager pay from Stan. She stepped out into the drizzling evening. The streetlights cast long, watery reflections on the wet pavement. She had no one to call, nowhere to be. She walked towards the sea, the salty spray cold on her face. She looked out at the vast, gray emptiness of the ocean. It was a horizon of a different kind, one without promise, without light. 2 women, 1 flight. One had taken an act of ugliness and transformed it into a legacy of grace that would lift others up for years to come. The other was left with nothing but the echo of her own venom, a ghost in a life she had single-handedly destroyed. The final verdict had been delivered not by a judge or a jury, but by the relentless, impartial calculus of character. One had reached for the stars, the other had been left behind in the dark. The story of Captain Amelia Sterling and Caroline Preston is more than just a viral moment of karmic justice. It's a powerful testament to the clash between prejudice and professionalism. Amelia's journey shows us that true authority isn't demanded or inherited through privilege. It's earned through skill, grace, and an unwavering commitment to one's duty, even in the face of profound disrespect. Caroline's downfall serves as a stark reminder that the biases we harbor can have devastating, life-altering consequences, not just for others, but ultimately for ourselves. In a world where snap judgments are made in an instant, Amelia's story compels us to look beyond our own assumptions. It celebrates the quiet strength of those who refuse to be defined by others' bigotry, and instead let their excellence speak for itself. If you found this story of resilience and hard-hitting karma as compelling as we did, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs to see it. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas where justice, in one way or another, always finds its runway. And let us know in the comments below, what do you think was the most satisfying moment of payback in this incredible story?